My name is Carlos Morales. I will be giving the War in the Middle East speech. War. Something that has been around since the existence of man. Countless wars, countless battles within those wars, victories, losses, depending on what side of the fence you were on. Allow us to turn back the hands of time, taking us back 19 years to the year of 2001, a year that most Americans will never forget. Many of us, including myself, were only babies with no recollection of where we were at or of what we were doing with our families when that tragedy hit. We are, of course, talking about the tragedy of the unfortunate event of 9/11. That day would ultimately resort to the United States waging war on terrorism, a war that we still fight to this day. This means that American troops have been sacrificing, fighting, and dying on foreign soil to carry out the mission of the United States and protect its people basically ever since I have been born. Everybody who was old enough at the time to understand what was happening remembers exactly where they were at and what it is that they were doing when they found out about this act of terrorism. For many, it was a calling to be the first to defend our Constitution, which led them into joining the armed forces in order to protect our people. I bring you all here today to speak about where the darkest things of what one human being can do to another and where it all takes place. We are talking about war. We, of course, are not talking about any war. We're talking about the ongoing war which has plagued the Middle East with terror and violence. The same war a lot of us have probably had some sort of family that has either fought or is currently fighting to keep us safe. Nowadays, Americans are still very separated on terms of their political views and moral values. Instead of agreeing to disagree, most people in America either stand on the far left or they stand on the far right. Very few are smart enough to do what we did when this tragedy happened, and that is to meet in the middle. I was not old enough to witness this for myself, but the ones who were, they speak about how great and how truly inspiring it was to see all Americans come forth as one. At that time, it did not matter who you were voting for. It did not matter if your moral values aligned to be the same. It did not matter if we agreed on the same policies. None of this mattered. What mattered at that time was coming together as one and coming to the conclusion of we love this country. What are we going to do about this as Americans? Which is in fact what weighed in the heavy decision of protecting this nation we built by leaving our homes and going overseas straight into the heart of where terrorism lies, which is the Middle East. The beginning of the war was horrific to say the least. War itself is a truly horrifying aspect of human life, but this war was like one that we have never seen before. Going into a completely new environment from which we are not used to is always one of the greatest challenges. In World War II, it was urbanized warfare where Allied troops fought through urbanized cities through France and Germany to stop the Axis. In Vietnam, our troops had to fight a new and different style of war once again, which is called jungle warfare. They had to adapt to the intense and scorching heat and humidity, which is heavy in and on itself, but that was the least of their worries because they were watching out for Vietnamese snipers who hid in trees and kamikaze troops who hid in foxholes which were completely hidden throughout these jungles that they were patrolling. Moving on to the current war that we face today, we come across a new type of war. Not just the fact that it's in a desert or that it's sandy, but the fact that we face a completely new enemy with new weapons of mass destruction. War has never been a clean or pretty process. It has always been dirty and ugly. There is no way to say which war was worse than which, But I would personally be most paranoid about more than anything else is the IEDs, or the improvised explosive devices that our troops have to deal with today. These are handmade bombs by the terrorists that we face, and I could go on and on about the disgustingly creative ways that these terrorists use these bombs, not only against us, but against their own people. I will only give a few examples in order to paint a real picture of the differences of all of these wars. Most people know about the countless IEDs which are set on the main roads, which are targeted towards heavy infantry assault vehicles which carry American troops. Another way is they will strap an IED onto another human being who is either willing to die or is usually going to be mentally handicapped, and they will send them into a crowd of civilians or American troops, and well, you know what happens after that. On the bright side of things, after years and years, after countless sacrifices, and after many, many casualties, the US, with the help of other allied countries, are now getting to the point of the war where we are occupying less and less bases in the Middle East, and every year we're pulling more and more troops out. This is, of course, up until what I like to call the Great Scare, because Trump called in a drone strike which killed an Iranian general, which could have potentially started World War III. Thankfully, the Iranian chief said he does not wish death to America, he only wishes death on Trump and higher ranking military personnel who were personally responsible for that drone strike. In other words, we avoided a whole war. War is the most raw and unfiltered version of what one man could do to another man, for the greater cause that is valued to that individual. This war has lasted through the presidency of 3 different people. But war is also something that has happened since the beginning of civilizations being formed, and unfortunately, it will continue to happen long after we are gone and dead. It could even happen again within our lifetimes. It already has once.